Hey guys, welcome to week 4. Oh, a little icons moved. Okay, just a reminder, asynchronous. Attendance is demonstrated by your academic engagement. When you see the light bulb icon, it is an opportunity for extra credit in the gradebook. Just remember, you guys can get 10 points extra credit by the lectures and those opportunities, and then 5 points extra credit at the end of the course for filling out your course evaluation. Checklist for this week. We have learning materials February 9th. Your discussion board, your initial post needs to be in by February 6th so that your peers can give you guys replies. This week, you guys are going to be doing 5 replies. By February 9th, you guys have your quiz on February 9th. And then we're going to start our project, part 1 and part 2, empathy research, and our personas. And those are both going to be February 9th. And then those are the days. Module 4 learning goals. In this module, we're going to learn more about design thinking and UX design process. We learned a little last week about design thinking in the last module, and we're going to learn more about it in this module. You also will be using design thinking principles in your guys' course project. And so we're going to work on the first 2 parts of the project in this module this week to prepare you for some of the design thinking strategies that are coming up later on in the course. And so we're going to start by watching a video from David Kelly with IDEO about creative confidence.
Talk to you today about creative confidence. I'm going to start way back in the 3rd grade at Oakdale School in Barberton, Ohio. I remember one day my best friend Brian was working on a project. He was making a horse out of the clay that our teacher kept under the sink. And at one point, one of the girls that was sitting at his table, seeing what he was doing, leaned over and said to him, "That's terrible. That doesn't look anything like a horse." Right? And Brian's shoulders sank. And he wadded up the clay horse and he threw it back in the bin. I kind of never saw Brian do a project like that ever again. And I wonder how often that happens, you know? It seems like when I tell that story of Brian to my class, you see, a lot of them want to come up after class and tell me about their similar experience, how a teacher shut them down or how a student was particularly cruel to them. And they some kind of opt out of thinking of themselves as creative at that point, right? And I see that opting out that happens in childhood, and it moves in and becomes more ingrained even by the time you get to adult life. So we see a lot of this, you know, when we have a workshop and we have clients in to work with us side by side, eventually get to the point in the process it's kind of fuzzy or unconventional. And eventually these big shot executives whip out their Blackberries and they say they have to make really important phone calls and they head for the exits. And they're just so uncomfortable. When we track them down and ask them what's going on, they say something like, "I'm just not the creative type." Well, we know that's not true. If they stick with the process, if they stick with it, they end up doing amazing things. And they surprise themselves just how innovative they and their teams really are. So I've been looking at this kind of fear of judgment that we have, you know, that you don't do things, you're afraid you're going to be judged. If you don't, you know, say the right creative thing, you're going to be judged. And I had a major breakthrough when I met the psychologist, Albert Bandura. I don't know if you know Albert Bandura, but if you go to Wikipedia, it says that he's the 4th most important psychologist in history, you know, like Freud, Skinner, somebody in Bandura. Bandura is 86 and he still works at Stanford. He's just a lovely guy. And so I went to see him because he's just worked on phobias for a long time, which I'm very interested in. He had developed this this way, this kind of methodology that ended up curing people in a very short amount of time. Like in 4 hours, he had a huge cure rate of people who had phobias. And we talked about snakes. I don't know why we talked about snakes. We talked about snakes and fear of snakes as a phobia. It was really enjoyable, really interesting. He told me that he'd invite the test subject in, and he'd say, you know, there's a snake in the next room, and we're going to go in there. And to which he reported that most of them replied, hell no, I'm not going in there. Certainly if there's a snake in there. But Bandura has a kind of a step-by-step process that was super successful. So he'd take people to this like two-way mirror looking into the room where the snake was, and he'd get them comfortable with that. And then through a series of steps, he'd move them. They'd be standing in the doorway with the door open, and they'd be looking in there, and he'd get them comfortable with that. And then many more steps later, kind of baby steps, they'd be in the room. They'd have like a leather glove, like a welder's glove on, and they'd eventually touch the snake. And when they touched the snake, everything was fine. They were cured. In fact, everything was better than fine. These people who had lifelong fears of snakes were saying things like, look how beautiful that snake is. And they were holding it in their laps. Right? Bandura calls this process guided mastery. I love that term, guided mastery. Right? And something else happened. These people who went through the process and touched the snake ended up having less anxiety about other things in their lives. Right? They tried harder, they persevered longer, and they were more resilient in the face of failure. Right? They just gained a new confidence. And Bandura calls that confidence self-efficacy, right? The sense that you can change the world and that you can attain what you set out to do. Well, meeting Bandura was really cathartic for me because I realized that this, famous scientist had documented and scientifically validated something that we've seen happen over, for the last 30 years, that we could take people who had the fear that they weren't creative, and we could take them through a series of steps, kind of like a series of small successes, and they turned kind of fear into familiarity, and they surprised themselves. The transformation is amazing. We see at the D School now all the time, people from all different kinds of disciplines, they think of themselves as only analytical, and they come in and they go through our process, they build confidence, and now they think of themselves differently. And they're totally emotionally excited about the fact that they walk around thinking of themselves as a creative person, right? So I thought one of the things I do today is take you through, and show you what this journey looks like. To me, that journey looks like Doug Dietz. Doug Dietz is a technical person. He designs medical imaging equipment, large medical imaging equipment. He's worked for GE and he's had a fantastic career. But at one point, he had a moment of crisis. He was in the hospital looking at one of his MRI machines in use when he saw a young family and this little girl. And that little girl was crying and was terrified. And Doug was really disappointed to learn that nearly 80% of the pediatric patients in this hospital had to be sedated in order to deal with this MRI machine. Right? And this was really disappointing to Doug because before this time, he was proud of what he did. He was saving lives with this machine, but it really hurt him to see the fear that this machine caused in kids. About that time, he was at the D School at Stanford taking classes. He was learning about our process, about design thinking, about empathy, about iterative prototyping. And he would take this new knowledge and do something quite extraordinary. He would redesign the entire experience of being scanned. And this is what he came up with. He turned it into an adventure for the kids. He painted the walls and he painted the machine and he got the operators retrained by people who know kids, like, children's museum people. And now, so when the kid comes, it's an experience. And they talk to him about the noise and the movement of the ship. And when they come, they say, okay, you're going to go into the pirate ships, but be very still because we don't want the pirates to find you. Right? And the results were super dramatic. Right? So from something like 80% of the kids needing to be sedated to something like 10% of the kids needing to be sedated. And the hospital and GE were happy too because you didn't have to call the anesthesiologist all the time, they could put more kids through the machine in a day. So the quantitative results were great. But Doug's results that he cared about were much more qualitative. He was with one of the mothers waiting for her child to come out of the scan. And when the little girl came out of her scan, she ran up to her mother and said, Mommy, can we come back tomorrow? Right. And so I've heard Doug tell the story many times of his personal transformation and the breakthrough design that happened from it. But I've never really seen him tell the story of the little girl without a tear in his eye. Doug's story takes place in a hospital. I know a thing or two about hospitals. A few years ago, I felt a lump on the side of my neck, and it was my turn in the MRI machine. It was cancer. It was the bad kind. I was told I had like a 40% chance of survival. So while you're sitting around like with the other patients in your pajamas and everybody's pale and thin, and you're waiting for your turn to get the gamma rays, you think of a lot of things. Mostly you think about, am I going to survive? And I thought a lot about what was my daughter's life going to be like without me? But you think about other things. I thought a lot about what was I put on earth to do? What was my calling? What should I do? Right. And I was lucky because I had lots of options. We've been working in health and wellness and K through 12 and the developing world. And so there were lots of projects that I could work on. But I decided and I committed to at this point that the thing I most wanted to do was to help as many people as possible regain the creative confidence they lost along their way. And if I was going to survive, that's what I wanted to do. I survived, just so you know. I really believe that when people gain this confidence, and we see it all the time at the D School and at IDEO, that they actually start working on the things that are really important in their lives. We see people quit what they're doing and go in new directions. We see them come up with more interesting and more ideas so that they can choose from better ideas, and they just make better decisions. So I know at TED you're supposed to have a change the world kind of thing, isn't that? Everybody has a change the world thing. If there is one for me, this is it to help this happen. So I hope you'll join me on my quest. You as kind of thought leaders, it would be really great if you didn't let people divide the world into the creatives and the non-creatives like it's some God-given thing. And to have people realize that they're naturally creative, and that those natural people should let their ideas fly. That they should achieve what Bandura calls self-efficacy, that you can do what you set out to do, and that you can reach a place of creative confidence and touch the snake. Thank you.
It's such a sweet video. I have a hands-on activity that we're going to do later on in the presentation that will help you guys gain some confidence. So module 4 planning. In this module, we're going to start working on our course project. We're not going to be designing a fully developed new app or website, but you guys are going to complete research, create personas and make a style guide, draw wireframes up, design mock-ups, and make an interactive prototype for a redesign, or you guys are going to create something new of your guys' choice. And then you guys are going to compile everything that you guys made for the project into a document called the design brief. That can be done on the Google Drive documents. And then you guys are going to record a presentation video about it. Just make sure to check out the Sephora app redesign link in the learning materials for a really good example of what you guys are expected to do for your project. The completed design brief includes a link to the interactive prototype. You have to make sure that your link works at the end. And it is intended to be a strong portfolio piece for you guys. So this is something that you guys want to put in either your digital portfolio or your physical portfolio to kind of, give to clients or show people, hey, this is what I've done. This supports the kind of work that I would like to be doing moving forward. And so just remember that your design brief is a working document. You guys are going to be editing it for a while, stuff like that. So make sure that you guys continue to update it by the end of the course when you guys submit that. And then we signed up for Figma in week 1. So next week, you guys are going to want to get your accounts up and loaded if you have not already, and deep dive into Figma to kind of get ahead of time and figure out what you can do on there and how you guys can use that tool to the best of your ability. There is LinkedIn learning videos that you guys can watch if you guys need that as well. That gives a good introduction to Figma other than what I provided you guys. And then also you guys are gonna start with the introduction videos on the basics of Figma if you're not familiar with that as well. And then you guys can figure out how to watch free videos and stuff like that if you guys have more time. With doing the part 1 and part 2 of the project, if you would like to meet with me to formulate a new project instead of doing an application redesign, that is fine. I've done that in the past with some classmates and peers. Or if you guys are confused and would like some clarity on some things, you guys can reach out as well to set up a Zoom meeting, informal Zoom meeting. I wanted to put that. The fastest way to contact me is through email. I do have my notifications turned on for IvyLearn for the inbox. So when you guys message me on there, I do get an email as well. But email probably the fastest way to reach out to me. And then if you guys do want to meet with me regarding your project to formulate a new project, or just kind of clarify what you guys want to be working on, I am willing to give you guys a 2-day extension for those 2 project parts of the module. And then I have a little key up here. So the latest date to submit a meeting request is Wednesday. Learning materials. Our course has some learning materials attached to it, some videos to watch, and some articles to read, although you guys do not have to do those if you don't want to. Just make sure that you guys watch my weekly recordings every week. And then we are going to dive into Behind the Design with Maddie Beard that talks about researching and recruiting. And this is 3 parts. This is part 1.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. Today I'm starting a new series of Behind the Design where I'm going to be taking you through the process of steps for this app design and case study. This series is perfect for freelancers as well as designers who are building their portfolio out with personal projects. So feel free to pause this video and check out the case study that I'm referring to on Behance. I've got a link in the description below. Okay, so part 1 of this series is going to include writing your research plan and recruiting participants. Let's start from the very beginning. You're either going to be starting with a brief if you are working with a client, or just with a topic if you are creating this project for your portfolio. So for me, since I'm just working on this project as a portfolio builder, I wanted to choose a topic that I'm really interested in and would love to get work in the future. So my topic is aromatherapy, and specifically aromatherapy in the home. And before I could really dive in, I had to do a little bit of background research. I had to figure out exactly what problems people were having within the aromatherapy space, as well as what opportunities are there for technology. So I did a little bit of background research as to who are the big players in the aromatherapy industry, specifically those who make diffusers. And I also had to figure out who they were marketing to, who is actually buying these diffusers, why are they buying them, why are they using aromatherapy, what benefits are they gaining, as well as where they're using it. So in what context and in what scenarios. And so to figure this out, I really just went to Google. I did a lot of Google searching. I read through some forums. I thought about my own experiences with aromatherapy and my diffusers that I use at home. I talked to some friends and I came up with a problem statement and a hypothesis that I wanted to set out to prove or disprove with my research. The problem statement I'm working with is people who use essential oil diffusers in their homes want to integrate aromatherapy into their daily routines to stimulate desired feelings and encourage intended action, but they struggle to do so because of the level of effort and forethought required. And my hypothesis was a tool which allows people to automate their aromatherapy experience will enable the use of essential oils not only for their health benefits, but as sensory stimulus for entering an intended headspace within the home environment. So, like I said, the whole idea behind doing research is to either prove or disprove this hypothesis, and also, of course, come up with ideas as to how you might go about solving the problem by talking to real users. So in order to conduct really effective research, it's important to first put together a research plan. This is something that one of my mentors helped me figure out how to do, and it was something that I came back to so often throughout my research and really just guided me through the whole process. So a great research plan has a few different sections. So the first section is just the overview. Just write a super general statement around your problem space and what you're trying to achieve with your research. Next, you're going to outline your research goals. So what are you trying to figure out throughout this research? This could be a ton of different things. For me, I wanted to better understand the target user's motivations, beliefs, desires around this topic of aromatherapy in the home. I also wanted to understand the environment and the scenarios in which these types of experiences happen for them. I wanted to learn what might be missing from their current experience, and I also wanted to gather some general data about how people feel about digital wellness. It's something they think about. Is this something that is going to come into play when it comes to my solution? So, for example, if I found that people did not like the idea of tech facilitating a wellness experience or a self-care experience, then I know that an app is not a great solution for this. Next, we're going to be outlining the methodology as well as the tasks that you want your participants to complete within the interview. So this is just a foundational interview. This isn't a user test or anything like that. And so the tasks can be really simple. For example, for me, the methodology I wanted to use was just a remote interview. I wanted it to be a discussion. I wanted it to be very informal. And I wanted them to walk me through how they use their diffuser within their home if that was something that they were comfortable showing me. I also outlined here how long the interview was going to be, as well as how I was going to compensate my participants. And lastly, a little bit in detail of how you will be conducting the session. Will it be over Zoom, or how will you physically be doing the interview? The next thing you want to outline is the participant criteria. So you can't just interview anyone off the street. So look at your research goals and figure out what requirements people need to meet in order to be a good participant in your research study. So for me, when I was doing my background research, I found a targeted age group that I thought would be helpful to work within. I also knew I wanted to interview people who already use aromatherapy regularly. And I knew that I wanted to get a variety of different home ecosystems. So maybe people who live alone, with a partner, with roommates, with children. I wanted to get a variety of those so that I could know that I'm getting a good representative sample of data. For you, you might think about a particular profession or location or interests in terms of how you are choosing your interview participants. It also might be important to figure out their income or other things like that that will make sure that your participants are a good fit for your research study. And lastly, you should outline the timeline in which you are completing this research. So when are you going to be doing your recruiting? When are you going to hold the study and all the interviews? And when are you going to synthesize your findings and data? And so this is important because you want to make sure that the people that you're reaching out to have availability during the time where you are conducting the interviews. Okay, so now that you've got your research plan, you have everything you need to create a recruiting post to send out on social media and share around so that you can get people to sign up for your study. When you're creating this post, it's important to keep it really general. And what I mean is don't keep it general in terms of what they should expect and the time commitment and the compensation. That should be very specific, but keep it general in terms of what you're going to be asking them about. So
I did want to pause it here. She mentions compensation. You don't have to have compensation. That's just something for a higher level client if you guys are looking for research participants. It is easier if you guys have some kind of reward or incentive to gain those research participants, but it is not necessary.
I'll give you an example. For my particular research study, as I mentioned, I knew I wanted to be talking mostly about aromatherapy in the home. But I also had some really general questions I wanted to get answered about self-care in the home and about digital wellness. And so those are a lot more general, where I didn't want them to have the preconceived idea of aromatherapy in the back of their mind. I wanted them to not know exactly what to expect and just come expecting to talk about self-care in the home. And so that's what I included in my recruiting post. So, like I mentioned, it's important to include the incentive. So, what are you compensating them with, as well as how much time they should be setting aside for this interview if they get picked. And of course, you want to include a call to action. So for me, because I needed to weed out some people and figure out exactly if they meet the requirements, I included a Google form that they should fill out so that I could get a little bit more information from them to figure out if they're a good fit for the study. So in this survey, I included questions about their age, their living arrangements, as well as how often they use the following self-care practices, of course, aromatherapy being one of them. And so this survey acts as a great bridge for you to collect some data and also figure out who to reach out to for your actual research interviews. My last tip for creating this post is to design it really well. So you are all designers, so you should be able to make this look nice in order to build trust and try to encourage engagement so that people will want to sign up for your study. So now you might be wondering how to get enough people to see this post and sign up. If you're working with a client, this is a great time for them to share out this recruitment post. But if you are just doing this as a personal project and you don't have anyone to share out for you, I have some tips that might be helpful. So the first thing that I did that was really helpful for me was I looked around at some influencers that I followed that might have an audience that would be a good fit. So I follow this YouTuber. Her channel is called Femhead, and she posts a lot about self-care. And I just figured that a lot of people who watch her videos and follow her on Instagram would be a really good fit and might be interested in participating. So I kind of went out on a limb and emailed her to see if she wouldn't mind sharing out my survey. I explained in detail what it was and who I am and exactly what I was trying to do. And, just kind of left it at no pressure, but I would love it if you would share this out. I think your followers would be interested. And she was really sweet and she ended up doing that for me. And that's how I got a lot of my participants. If you're not super comfortable with that, you could look at Facebook groups that have people who might be interested and talk to the host and see if they wouldn't mind sharing your post. You can also look at Reddit threads where people are already talking about the topic and throw in your link in there. You can put it out on Twitter and just ask your friends to retweet it. There really are so many ways to share this out, and you would be surprised at how quickly you will get some great participants for your study. And on that note, it's really important to keep an eye on who you're getting to fill out this form. So this will allow you to see what gaps need to be filled and where you might need to do a little bit more recruiting, or whether you can stop your efforts altogether and just start reaching out to people. For my project, I ended up interviewing 12 people with 4 different home ecosystems, and that ended up being perfect for me. There's really no perfect amount of people that you should be interviewing. It's just whatever works for your project and your budget. Then, of course, once you go through the results and figure out who would be a good fit, you can just keep those names and emails and data in a spreadsheet and start reaching out to them to see if they will book a time with you. Don't miss the next video because I'm going to be showing you how I put together my discussion guide, as well as sharing some tips for conducting research interviews. If you found this video helpful, feel free to...
Okay, moving on to part 2. So this one's going to be talking about conducting foundational interviews, and I just kind of wanted to like fill the gaps of why I chose Maddie Beard. There's three reasons. One, I think she's close in age to most, not all, but most college students. She uses similar applications that are available to almost everyone, like the Google Drive, Figma, Miro, stuff like that, that we're also utilizing in this course. And then she also has consistent UX and UI terminology and language that she uses. And if you guys like the way that she like describes things or talks about things and goes into details, this is her YouTube information with her like little @ and everything like that. And you guys are more than welcome to subscribe to her.
Hey everyone, welcome to part 2 of Behind the Design, where I'm showing you how I created this app design and case study. If you missed the first part of the series, I'd recommend going back and watching it before moving forward to part 2. And also, if you haven't seen the case study that I'm referring to in this Behind the Design series, you can go and check that out in the link in the description below. All right, with that stuff out of the way, what we're going to be talking about today is writing your discussion guide as well as other tips for conducting your research interviews. I'd recommend putting together this discussion guide that we're about to go through while you are recruiting. And that way, whenever you get to the end of your recruitment and you're ready to reach out to people, you're already ready to start conducting those interviews right away. So, like any good outline, this discussion guide is going to have 3 main parts: the introduction, the discussion, and the conclusion. And the introduction and conclusion are actually important, which is why I'm including them here. The introduction is where you're going to introduce yourself and, make sure that the person's really comfortable with you. Kind of break the ice, talk about kind of what's going on with them, how they're doing. You can just kind of set the stage for how this interview is going to be. Like I mentioned in the previous video, I wanted my interview to be very much a conversation and a very casual conversation like you would have with a friend. And so that is why I spent a good amount of time just kind of getting comfortable with the person before I jump into the questions. And while you're doing that, it's also important to let them know or to ask them if they'd be comfortable if you record the session. I would definitely recommend doing that so that you don't have to take notes throughout the session and you can be engaged in the conversation. So you can let them know that that's why you're doing it, that you won't be showing these clips to anyone else and you'll just be using them for your own research. And you just want to make sure that they know what to expect. You can kind of outline what you're going to be asking them about. And if there's any tasks that they need to complete, then you can let them know then and make sure to let them know that after the session is when you will be compensating them. And then as you get into the meat of the discussion guide, you're going to break out your discussion into different sections and topics. So for me, the first one I wanted to start with was the most general one, being their home environment. And the reason that I go general to specific throughout my discussion guide is because I didn't want to give away to the person that I was speaking with that I am doing an essential oil diffuser app. Because then if they have that in the back of their mind, they might kind of tweak their answers subconsciously and talk more about aromatherapy than they actually would if we were just talking about what they do in their home, their self-care, and things like that. So we want to start really general and get more specific towards the end of the conversation. So for me, my general topics were home environment. So I asked them a bunch of questions about that. Then I moved into their relationship with mindfulness, wellness, tech, and self-care. Then I started to get into their experience with their current essential oil diffuser. And lastly, I talked with them about how they feel about an app or technology in general facilitating that experience with their diffuser. And so I obviously had tons of questions within those different topics that I went through. With some cases, I had to ask a lot of questions, and with other people, they really kind of just spoke and the conversation flowed really nicely, and I didn't have to prompt them quite as much. Both can be really helpful, but it's great to have a ton of questions outlined in case people start to answer with one-word answers or just yes or no. You want to keep asking why if they start to do that. And it's just great to have a ton of questions planned out in case the conversation gets a little bit slow. And lastly, with the conclusion, you want to ask them if they have anything that they want to add that they think you should have asked about, but you didn't. You want to ask them if they have any questions for you. And then if they're interested, you can tell them what your project is all about after they've answered all the questions. If they're super curious, then I think it's great to let them know what you're researching for. And usually they'll be super interested in it and they'll ask you more questions once you start talking about your project. And of course, at the end, along with compensating them, you want to make sure you thank them and really get across that you appreciate their time and their willingness to open up and have this conversation with you.
Before we go into interview tips, I did want to add to that if you guys do have a participant or two who is really interested in your project and the interview and everything like that, you can ask them if they would be interested in being a participant in your usability testing that you guys are going to be doing with your course project. And if they're interested in that usability test, then you would just tell them, hey, I have some steps I need to take, more research, more planning, more wireframes, stuff like that before I come back to my usability testing. But if you would be interested, I can do usability testing with you. And then you already have one participant for your usability testing. And it's kind of like you're taking them through the story of the beginning with the interview, and then maybe there's something in the middle where you test out your usability one time, and then right before you submit it, if there's something that needs to be fixed or something that you think looks great, but someone else might feel like, oh, I feel like this could be better organized, and you have to go back and do more usability testing. Those participants are usually more than willing to do usability tests with you.
Okay, now we're going to get into some interview tips. So before this, I really had not done foundational interviews before. I had done some user interviews and some user tests, but I had never just had these types of conversations with people up front in order to kind of guide my project in the very beginning. So these are some things that I learned both from my mentor and just throughout the experience doing these interviews. I learned that you should not be afraid of silence. So I'm someone who gets a little bit nervous during conversations and tends to fill the void with my own voice. And this is something that you do not want to do in an interview. And that's because, of course, you want them to talk. And if there's a little silence, then that's totally okay. You can see if they are going to add to what they said, or you can just let the silence pass and then move on to the next question. My second tip here is to not ask leading questions. And this is really obvious. This is like the number one rule of research, but whenever you're coming up with your discussion guide, really look at every single question you came up with and see if there's a way that you can ask it in a little bit more of an unobtrusive way. And what I mean by that is you don't want to make any assumptions when you're asking these questions. You want to start with the very basic question, the most open-ended, and see what they give you, and then ask questions based on their answer. So you don't want to put any words in their mouth. You don't want to assume that they feel a certain way or that they have a certain experience. You want to get what their feeling is, what their experience is, and then ask why and ask more clarifying questions about that. So here's an example. You don't want to ask a question like, would you want an app to remind you when it's time to clean your diffuser? A better question would be, what kinds of reminders would you find helpful from a smart diffuser app? Then once they start answering that question, then you can get a little bit more specific if you want by asking, would this type of notification help? Would this type of reminder help? But I think it's important to get their first reaction to the more general question first and then go off of that. And lastly, I know I mentioned this a couple of times, but you definitely want to keep asking why. especially if you have a research participant who's answering in yes or no answers or just answering in 1 or 2 words and not going in depth. It's okay to keep asking why. A lot of times in UX research, it's not as important what a person does, but why they do it. So their motivations and their beliefs and their expectations are really what counts. All right, guys, that's all I've got for you today. I really hope you found that helpful. As always, if you
All right. Behind the design. There is an extra question over here. After watching all of Maddie's videos up to this point, does anybody want to share something that they learned or noticed and how they could be or will be implementing this into their project?
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. Today is part 3 in the series where I'm walking you through the process I took to create this Smart Diffuser app and case study. If you're new to this series, go back and watch part 1 and 2 before you watch this video. And also take a look at the case study on Behance if you want a little bit more context. So now that we have planned our research and conducted our interviews, now it's time to go back through them and synthesize our findings and draw some conclusions. But before you get into the nitty-gritty of organizing your interviews and going back through and listening to them again, I would actually recommend sitting down and just thinking about how they went and thinking about some standout things that people said that really stuck with you, any standout insights or things that people said that surprised you, some general commonalities that you notice, and just your initial reactions. This is honestly going to be so helpful because these are the things that are probably the most important findings from your research. Yes, when you go back through, you're probably going to remember more things, especially if you did tons of interviews and you forgot some. But honestly, these first initial reactions are probably what is going to drive your project the most. So set aside some time, sit down, and just jot down your initial reactions and things that really struck you during these interviews. Then once you've done that, you can get into the nitty-gritty. So I personally used a free trial of Dovetail just because I was really interested in how the program worked. I used it to put in my interviews. I just put in the MP4s and it transcribed everything, as close as it could. And I was able to tag the different interviews, highlight things and categorize them. And while that was super helpful, I don't think that it's really worth buying Dovetail just to do that. I think there are tons of other programs that will help you do it. One that I have not used, but I've heard great things about is otter.io. So that's something that is either free or a little bit more affordable that you could try out. But even if you don't want to go through and transcribe all of your interviews, I would just recommend going back and listening to them again and jotting down notes of things that are important. But if you
I wanted to pause her there for a second. So if you guys decide to listen to your recordings and stuff like that and just type out some notes, Mira will automatically create charts and graphs and organization methods to help you organize how your interviews went and what the takeaways were and stuff like that.
If you want to take this a step further, I would recommend going through and pulling some quotes, highlight those, and categorize them. So for example, the way I did this was the following categories: who they live with, whether or not they limit their tech use, the types of self-care they practice, their desired mood for their home, the time of day that they use their diffuser, and the benefits that they get out of essential oils. This way I was able to cross-reference whether there were any commonalities and relationships between these things. For example, did people who live alone practice self-care in certain ways? Did people who limit their tech use have certain benefits that they looked for in essential oils? So categorizing the data in that way can be really helpful if it's something that you're curious about. Once you have a good refresher of everything that you covered in these interviews and some general insights, now it's a great time to do some empathy mapping. So if you've never heard of empathy mapping, it's basically a way to put yourself in the user's shoes and imagine them using the product in the environment that they would be in real life. So you have an image in the middle that represents the user, and then around the user, you have different sections of places to put sticky notes that fill in each category. So the top category is goals and constraints. So figure out what the goals of the user is that's using your product and what constraints they have. For this project, for example, I had the goals and constraints as develop a regular self-care routine, feel balanced while working and living at home, understand how essential oils are benefiting me. And the constraints were they only have so many oils at home, they only have one diffuser, and I lead a busy lifestyle at home and don't have tons of spare time. Next section is say, think, and feel. So these are things that while using the product or around the same time they're using the product, what things are people thinking to themselves, saying to other people around them, or feeling? Some examples I used are I need to wind down. I don't have any time for myself and always feeling stuck in work mode. The next section is see. So put yourself in the user's shoes and think about what you would be seeing around you as you're using the product. I figured my user would be seeing their oils in their diffuser. They'd be looking at the app, seeing the rituals they've set up, and they would be seeing a list of oils that they've been using recently within the app. Next is what they might hear while using the product. They might hear the diffuser starting, maybe a dog barking in the background, their clients or manager on the phone, a baby crying, or maybe cars going by outside. So as you can see, you're really just setting the scene here. Next is tasks and actions. And these can be both related and unrelated to the app. Just basically anything that could be going on at once for someone using the product you're designing. So they need to create a ritual. Maybe they need to fold laundry or feed the baby. Maybe they need to write a lesson plan, and maybe they need to return several emails. Now, moving on to the bottom section, we're going to think about some distractions they might have. While using the app, they might get a bunch of text notifications or social media notifications. They might be getting emails. They might have kids running around in the background, or even pets that need their attention, or even the TV or music playing. Next is motivations. So the things I wrote down are showing up for their families, their work, creativity, exercise and yoga, relaxation, freedom and control, rituals and consistency, and nature. These were all really common among the people that I talked to. And lastly, we're going to talk about the column all the way to the right, which is frustrations. So in talking to people through these interviews, I noticed a lot of common frustrations that people mentioned. And those were notifications.
Frustrations is also known as pain points. I know that we use some different UX and UI terminology, but if you ever see the word pain points is also frustrations.
Too much stimulus, noisiness, and messiness. So as you can see, not all of these things are things that I can control within the app experience. Some of them are happening outside of the product, but some of them I can control, and it's really important to keep all of them in mind whenever I'm designing. So for me, I felt a ton of commonalities between everyone that I ended up interviewing. So I actually didn't end up creating more than one empathy map. But if you're interviewing a lot of different people that fall into different categories, maybe you want to break up by age group or profession or home environment, or maybe they have kids versus don't have kids. If you're seeing a relationship that differs between categories in that way, then you could definitely complete 2 different or even 3 different empathy maps if they're going to be a lot different from each other. It really just depends on your project and your participants. And again, always go back to your research goals. Okay, so now you've written down your initial reactions, some really standout quotes or insights, and you have your empathy map. So now you can kind of summarize your findings and insights. And the way I did this was just by calling out the 5 most important insights that prove my hypothesis and are really going to drive the direction of my project. My first key insight was that people use oils depending on the time of day or intended activity. And this might seem obvious, but this was really important for me to prove in order to prove the concept for my path. So it was great that all of the insights I got from my interviews did confirm this hypothesis. The next really important insight was I learned that people often feel their diffuser is out of sight, out of mind. And this is a really important insight because my app should be something that reminds them to use their diffuser as much as they want to use the diffuser. So that's a really great opportunity. And I'm glad that I got that insight from my interviews. The next insight is that people are comfortable using tech within their wellness routines. And this was something I was hoping was true, but wasn't sure. So it's great that I was able to prove this to be true as well, at least within the sample of people I was interviewing. Next, I learned that people want to understand the benefits of the specific essential oils they're using and the frequency with which they're using them. And so this is something that came up a lot. And so I definitely want to add a feature that will help with that into the app. And lastly, I learned that they do not like notifications. This came up so much in my interviews. So something that I wanted to make note of. And whenever I'm designing the experience, I want to make sure there are as few notifications as possible. The notifications that are being used are really intentional and important and aren't super disruptive in any way. So once you've summarized those key insights, then it's a natural time to start thinking about the most important features that you're going to include within your app. So I decided to start to jot down on some sticky notes the key features that were coming to mind that I think would help solve all of these problems and really answer these insights. And then I even went a step further and started jotting down some sub features, some things that are nice to have. And so by jotting down all of my ideas, then later on I can go and cherry pick the ones that are most important and nix the ones that are just filling space and not really helping the user. So that's all I've got for part 3. In part 4, we're going to be taking the feature list you created and putting it into information architecture, as well as start the process of sketching. Thanks so much for watching.
Moving on, don't forget that extra credit question. All right, so we're going to be doing your Project 1 empathy research. This is what it looks like when you pull it up on IvyLearn. Remember, this is 50 points of your grade. All 5 sections, the methodology, research participants, data synthesis, insights, and the how might we, must be filled out in the empathy research section of the design brief. And the design brief is given to you guys as well. There is a helpful resource talking about Miro that I discussed in the video. Your file must be saved as a PDF, and then make sure that you create a citation for whatever reference that you guys use. How do you guys get graded? How do you guys get full points? This is the rubric. You guys should have access to this whenever. I like to pull up my rubric on one computer. Usually I have 2 computers in front of me, so well, 2 monitors in front of me. So I'll pull up one with the rubric, and then usually the other one will have what I'm working on so that I can make sure that I'm meeting all of the criteria. Persona. So a persona is a fictional representative character created to understand the needs, goals, and behaviors of a user group or a customer group. When Maddie was talking about on the video about taking what she learned from her research participants, everything that she gathered is something that is going to help her create this fake person, also known as a persona. It's a fictional character, but the data that the persona represents is real. So usually it's someone who underlines who their user is going to be within a project, and they are built on research, used to guide the project and create marketing strategies, something that backs up your hypothesis as well. There's 3 types of personas. There's user and customer personas, there's literary personas, and then there's something called Jungian personas. And it has more to do with psychology and just kind of like a social type of aspect, but we won't be focusing on those in this course. Some key characteristics to remember is that you want your persona to be fictional but realistic. So that means while imaginary, you want your persona to be based on real data about your target audience. You want your persona to be goal-oriented. So you want that to include your personal goals and motivations within this project. Personas need to be role-based so they can incorporate the user's roles and their profession or daily life, helping them inform design decisions based on where and how the product will be used. And then one of the big ones that kind of gets left out to the side is memorable. You want a persona that's memorable, that's going to stand out to your audience, that's really going to help connect your audience with what you're designing for. And the persona does that. The persona creates like a story behind what you're explaining and stuff like that. I don't know if you guys remember my Cerner example. I talked about, Sam. I think his name was Ellis. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was him and his son. And so you can create persona stories along with your personas to help kind of like back up what you're designing, back up the research that you've done and stuff like that, and just make it a memorable experience for your audience. So usually that includes a name, an age, a photo. But make sure that you guys don't use like a photo of like a person that you guys know or like the actual person that you're interviewing. There's multiple websites online to get stock imagery and stuff like that. But it's supposed to help the persona feel more real. And it's supposed to help your audience remember like who you're designing for. And then the last one is you want them to be actionable. So every detail in your persona should have a purpose in the designer decision-making process. So for example, if a persona's favorite wine is listed, it might be useful for designing a wine-related app, but if you're designing something else, it probably wouldn't. Personas. So you guys are going to create 4 fictional personas for part 2 of your guys' course project. It's worth 50 points. We have examples of personas. There's LinkedIn Learning, and it talks about if you're having trouble with accessing the LinkedIn Learning, you can get that for free, and it's through the My Ivy. It shows you examples and ways to get on that, but the link should work for you guys. It worked for me. And then the guidelines for that is your guys' persona should include a name, a photo, age, educational level, location, family household information, and then must fit your target market. So who are you designing for? Stuff like that. Who's going to be using your product? And then the file must be saved as a PDF. And then whatever picture you use, make sure that you guys cite that, you reference that image in APA format, and then whatever information you use as well. Here is the rubric for the personas. And then just your overall layout and your design of that as well. How you're like presenting your stuff. We're not going to go all the way into this video. I'll start it for you guys. But this is a step-by-step real-time example of Maddie redesigning the Poshmark app. And it also goes into interviewing and stuff like that and how she uses Figma to create this.
Hey guys, I'm back with another design with me. You really seem to enjoy watching me design in real time. So today we're going to be tackling an app that I use quite often that I feel like could stand a lot of UI improvements, and that's Poshmark. Just like in my last design with me, I'm going to link the file that I'm designing in here in Figma in the description box below. So you can pop that open and download it and design along with me, or get in some practice after this video. Okay, so let's first look at how this app looks today. And if you don't know, Poshmark is basically a marketplace app for selling used clothing online. It's like Depop and things like that. It's totally public, so anyone can post listings and anyone can purchase them. So yeah, let's dive in here. Going from left to right in the tab bar, first is the feed. This is basically your home screen where the algorithm surfaces categories and listings that it thinks that you would be interested in. I don't mind how this functions, but I do feel like it's a bit crowded and overwhelming. We have new listings by seller, by brand, Poshmark Lives, or what they call shows, which I don't really even know what that is. That's not something I ever interact with personally. We have someone's closet. I guess this is someone I follow, though I didn't actually think that I followed anyone. We have trending brands, recommended trends, markets or categories, stories, my likes, and it just goes on and on and on. I get that a feed is supposed to be super long and almost infinite, but I think if we redesign it, it could be less visually crowded and confusing and just a more overall positive scrolling and browsing experience. Okay, now the shop tab. I'm noticing the search bar is also present here, but with the addition of these suggested or maybe recent searches, which I do like. Then we see brands, my likes, recent views, more shows, trends, categories. I guess my beef with this is that I don't really see how it's different from the feed. It's just like more and more and more of the same. So that's something that I definitely want to think about for this redesign. Next, we have Sell, which I'm going to skip for this redesign. I'm only focusing on like the customer facing UI as opposed to the seller UI. So this video just isn't too long. After that, we have news, which to me is just notifications. I actually do like how you can filter these by category. I turned off all my notifications for this app because I honestly don't like to have notifications on any apps, but I get why they need to exist somewhere, and I personally don't mind this layout. And last, we have my profile, which I don't mind this layout either. I don't see any huge issue with those two tabs necessarily. I think my biggest issue with this app is less about the UX and more about two things. Number one, organization of content on the feed and shop tabs. And number two, the overall look and feel of the app. It feels very outdated to me. The content feels too squished, and it just doesn't make me want to spend time on the app. So with those things in mind, I think we're ready to take this into Figma. But before we do that, I want to take a minute to thank the sponsor of today's video, Careerist. If you're like me, you're always looking to learn new skills, especially if it means getting
I'm going to pause it there just so that we can move along. If you guys are interested in how to do this, I will post the link below. So looking ahead to Module 5, in next week's module, we're going to learn about the many changes a business organization can go through over the years, so how they change stuff and improve stuff. People can come and go, but the company needs to keep their files organized. So from a design perspective, that comes from the form of a style guide. And you guys are going to be creating a style guide. They're really fun, I promise. It's not a chore to do. But graphic designers create brand style guides to keep things consistent and unified across people, office locations, and time. In UX design, a style guide is necessary for the user interface, the UI, and other components of the project. This module is going to cover what should go inside your guys' style guide to keep that consistency and the end with the complete project. So, like an example is like Amazon has specific colors, everybody has to use that if they're citing Amazon. Another example that I can give is I work full-time for a family-owned and operated Anheuser-Busch wholesaler. And so whenever we use brands and stuff like that, even like brands that we like aren't Anheuser-Busch, everybody has a brand style guide. So it's something that like is recognizable. So whether that's color scheme, typography stays the same, graphics and layout stay the same, the backgrounds stay the same, stuff like that. I have to make sure that my hex codes match their hex codes. Sometimes printers can change the way that colors come out. So an example of that is making sure that your RGB color swatch and your CMYK color swatch numbers match. And even if they do match, you might have to either dial it up or dial it down depending on how your printer prints it, just to make sure that those colors match, because it is super important. So here is our hands-on activity. I called it Creative Confidence Sprint. And you guys are going to be designing 30 circles. This hands-on activity that I made was inspired by David Kelly from IDEO and the video that we watched for this week's module. So what you guys are going to do, well, my goal for it is to build creative confidence with you guys and to think like designers. So you guys are going to reframe the rules, explore options rapidly, and trust your guys' ideas. And so what you guys are going to need is an 8.5 by 11 paper with 30 circles on it. I'm going to provide a template below underneath the video as like one of like the links or whatever that you guys can download. But if you guys don't want to go that far, you guys can make your own. That's perfectly fine. The circles don't have to be perfect. You don't have to worry about that. And then use like any type of writing utensils, so a pen, pencil, marker, and then make sure you guys have that timer. And so it's going to take about 7 minutes. And so for the first one, if you're not going to use the template, make a template. And then you're going to fill in every circle with something that is meaningful to you. There's no constraints, anything can go. So you have to fill in all those 30 circles in the time frame. And this activity is kind of about the speed over perfection. So an example is you might have a circle that has a smiley face in it. You might be into cars. You could drive a car. You might be a cat person. Personally, I'm a dog person. But you might draw a little picture of a cat, a light bulb if you like to think outside the box, stuff like that. Then for the second part, you're going to think and notice. This should take about 1 minute. I put quickly because it's only 1 minute, but you're going to pick what circle is your favorite, what like you want to focus on, stuff like that. And then you guys are going to reflect for 2 minutes. So you're going to pick a question from the questions below that I have listed. You're going to restate it in a complete sentence, and you're just going to write that down on your page next to your 30 circles. Some options that you can pick from are, what did you notice that you had to fill all 30 circles quickly? Did you feel pressured or did you have freedom in this challenge? How did you decide what to draw? And then how might this relate to creative confidence? I would like you guys to do this. It is extra credit if you would like to post your 30 circles below, below my recording, along with the other extra credits, unless you guys just want to do this extra credit. And then as the last part, I'm not sure why it says 1, it's supposed to say 3. Oh wow, okay, so this is supposed to be 3 and this is supposed to be 4. My bad, sorry guys. But you guys are going to conclude with 2 minutes. So you guys are going to write a complete sentence that starts with one thing I learned about my creativity just now. And so the overall takeaways for this and the why factor is it has divergent ideation. So rapid idea generation without judgment. And then comfort with imperfection. So quantity first and then quality later. And then creative confidence. So trying ideas quickly builds trust and creative instincts. Just trusting yourself. And then we have Kahoot. The link will be posted below. And then, as I showed before, you guys can come over here to self-study. There's learn. Which of the following best describes the main purpose of empathy research in your course project? To compare existing app reviews, to finalize the prototype, to select a color palette, to understand real users' needs and context. And then I got some cute memes there for you guys as well. And if you guys don't want that option, there is flashcards. If you know it, you can hit the check mark, flip it over to get your answer. If you don't know it, or if you want more time, you can hit the X and it'll go on to the next one. If you would like a different option other than that, we have play solo. I like classic mode, but I'll do this one. Best rank. True or false, empathy research includes both what the user says and what the patterns emerge from participants. I want to get through this. I'm just going to hit true. Observing themes across participants is part of synthesizing data. True. Empathy research helps UX designers understand behavior beyond what users say. True. I gotta answer another one, sorry. Personas in this project must reflect fictional data only, be unrealistic but creative, represent the target market, or include UI components. Let's see what it does. Oh, I didn't watch the instructions. I think I hit spacebar. Nope, okay. And click. Perfect, I got it on the board. Ooh, I want the present. Oh man, I didn't get it. I think I have another opportunity. Oh, I got it. Okay. Oh man, it disappeared. Okay. I guess I was too slow. But that's another opportunity that you guys can do. If you guys don't want to play Kahoot, that's totally fine and up to you. This just kind of like is an overview of everything that you guys learned in Module 4. And then thank you for your guys' time today. If anybody has any course-related questions, you can reply in the comment section. If you have any personal concerns or questions, please send me an IvyLearn message. And then I did want to throw out there that if you guys would like to meet with me to go over what course project you guys are doing or would like to do or need help coming up with one instead of doing a redesign, just creating something from scratch, please send me an email as soon as possible or reach out on IvyLearn. Thank you for your time. See you guys.